I'm going to go ahead and talk about prop orientation on the X8. Okay, so this is really important, guys. When you're out at the field, if you've got one of these props on wrong, you're going to have a bad day. So make sure to really pay attention to this. So what we want to do is make sure that the front props on the top, they are spinning in this direction. So they're spinning away from the camera. These props in the rear, they're going the opposite direction. So they're spinning this direction, they're spinning towards the camera. Okay, then moving on to the bottom. These props, they are going to spin this way. So they're spinning towards the camera. And then the rear props on the bottom are spinning in this orientation. So they are going away from the camera. Okay, now what I'm going to do are pre-flight safety checks. So this is all of the things that you want to do to this drone and make sure that everything is good to go before you get in the air. This is really, really important. So don't get complacent. Don't speed through this stuff. Do this every single time. Okay, so obviously the props, as we just mentioned, the orientations, make sure that that's correct. Go through these nuts. Make sure that they're tight. You don't want any of these to be loose. Inspect the props. You want to make sure there's no dings, any dents, any creases, anything like that. These have to be perfect every flight. And if you see any kind of damage on the prop, make sure to change it out. Okay, another thing you want to do is go to these antennas and make sure they haven't come loose. So you can take your hand or a tool and just tighten these, make sure they're nice and tight. Okay, and then go through the machine, look at all the wires, make sure that nothing is nicked, there's no exposed wires. All of the carbon fiber looks good, nothing's cracked, there's no damage. All of the screws and fasteners and hardware are in place, everything's nice and tight and good to go. Okay, the next thing that you want to do is look at your camera mount and verify that after you've made your adjustments to camera angle, that these screws are torqued down correctly and nothing's loose. This one right here, this is going to be a 3mm driver, and then I believe this in the rear, this is a 4mm driver here. So make sure that those are nice and tight, and obviously you've got some screws running into the bottom of your camera. Needless to say, those need to be tightened as well. Okay, so now I'm going to discuss the battery system. This is a very, very important portion of this machine. You've got to get it right. You've got to pay attention to this. There's actually a lot going on with it, so let's get into it. The Lite version of this machine that's only got 4 motors, so the quad, it only accepts, you should really only fly 1 pack with that. There are 2 disconnects on that machine. What those are for is to give you an option of whether you want to run the batteries on the top or the bottom. But due to weight restrictions with that particular machine, I would just run 1 set. Now with the X8, it's designed for 2 packs. Okay, so the way that you install them is you've got a little lever here, and this is a dovetail system. So it's pretty simple. Make sure that this is loose, and then just run the dovetail into here. You're going to hear a click. That's a little safety pin. You want to hear that click, and that's going to stop this from coming off the back of the craft if this lever were to fail. And then so to set this thing, what you do is take this lever and then just move it into position and lock it down. And obviously the batteries on the bottom are going to work the same way. You're going to run this into here, and you can lock it down. Okay. Now, there are some pre-flight checks that you want to do with this before you get into the air. Okay, you want to make sure that the batteries are securely mounted to these trays here, and to do that, just make sure that these Velcro straps are nice and tight. Make sure that the wiring is undamaged and everything looks good. Now, if you are making up your own battery packs, this is what I assume a lot of people are going to want to do. Because this system's a bind and fly. It does not come with the batteries, so we can make these up for you, or you can do it yourself. If you do it yourself, you want to make sure and run these balance plugs through this little holder here, And the reason for that is it keeps these from flopping out in the wind and potentially getting into the props. You don't want a prop strike with that. And so this is just good for wire management, organization, and keeping those where they're supposed to be. Okay. So now I'm going to get into how you power this system up and that entire procedure. All right, so we're going to do a complete power up sequence. So this is pre-flight checks have been done. Obviously you've got your spotter with you, and we're going to go ahead and power up the system. And during that, I'm going to talk a lot about these batteries and how this battery system works. It's very important to pay attention to what I'm talking about here, because this is really important stuff. There's a lot going on with that. Okay, so getting this thing set up. So what you want to do is make sure, of course, that the batteries are well seated to this tray and that the straps are nice and tight. Take a battery checker. I know this may sound silly if you're confident that your batteries are charged, but you may have made a mistake, okay? So just do a quick check and make sure that the batteries are fully charged and ready to go. There is also a battery in the front. It is a little 850 mAh 4S, and that is for the FPV system. We'll show you that in a minute, but I'm going to start with these now. So there is a QS8 plug here, and then we've got a couple of AS150s. What you want to do is take this plug and plug it completely into the drone. You've got to make sure that this thing is fully plugged in. If you get it halfway, you're going to have a bad day, because it's not going to be able to flow the right current. It's not going to be able to flow enough current, rather, and you may be able to get into a hover, and then it's gonna burn out and you're going to come crashing down. So always make sure that this thing is fully plugged in. Okay, so we've done that now. There we go. Now the next thing is you've got this little balance plug here with a single wire coming off of it, and what this is for is to take voltage information from the flight packs, feed it to the flight controller, and then make its way to the OSD, so you know what kind of flight time you've got left by the voltage that you're seeing. Okay, so what you want to do is plug this in to the battery that has, one of the batteries that has the short AS150 red lead. Okay, if you plug it into this one, it's not going to work. You got to pick this or this battery. So I like to go to the bottom battery. So we're going to plug it in to its balance plug here, just like that. Now with the wire, just make sure that it's out of props, right? So it's not flapping around. Make sure it's tucked in here like this. You can even feed this wire back into the fuselage and make sure that everything's good to go like that. Okay, now let's go ahead and simulate powering this system up before a flight. Okay, so what you want to do, obviously turn your radio on.
Welcome to OpenTX.
Okay, and we've got it set up such that it's got a safety measure for arming. So you've got pre-arm, and then you have arm. Make sure that these switches are up, your throttle is down. Okay, now I'm going to spin this around. Okay, this is the battery, the dedicated battery for the FPV system. This is really important, this battery. Make sure before you fly, check its capacity. You might forget how many flights you've got on this thing, and you get in the air, and if this dies, you're in trouble. Okay, you don't want that to happen. Now, the next thing is, one of your pre-flight checks before you get in the air is to make sure that this is well seated. It's not going to come out in the air. And then you see this little XT60. This has got to be on this side of the strap. If you have it on the other side, that's a lot of weight that can be flapping around, and it could potentially pull this connector out. So make sure that the XT60 is secured well, and you're good to go. So what we want to do is plug this in. Okay, that gets power to the FPV system. All right, now that we've got all that plugged in, we're going to take the AS150s and plug them in. That's going to provide power to the money shot, both top and bottom. Okay, so you're good to go, and you want to check and see if you've got satellites reading in the OSD of your DJI goggles, and that everything looks good to go. You've got FPV feed, and you're ready.
And what we'll do now is verify in your goggles that you have all your OSD information, your satellites, proper voltage, make sure everything's working. Also, for this to arm, it does have to have a minimum of 6 satellites and a satellite lock in order for it to power on. Once you verify all that information, and we're doing this with the props off because we're not out at the flying field, but once you have all that information, you'll hit the pre-arm switch and then the arm switch. And there you go. Now to disarm, the pre-arm switch will not disarm it. It has to be the arming switch. And set the controller down, both switches set to off position, throttle down, and make sure nobody's touching it, and then it's safe to come over here and remove power from the system. Also want to disconnect, very important here, make sure to disconnect the DJI air unit power as well. Very easy to forget that one.
All right, we're back inside now. Apologize for the noise out there. We had to go out to the parking lot of our shop so we could get a GPS lock. So we're back inside in the AC now, and I'm going to take this time to discuss this right here. So on this system, we have a couple of XT60s. They're providing 12-volt power, each of them. The one here on the right, okay, if you're standing behind the drone, you look at the one on the right. This one pumps out 12 volts at 10 amps, so 120 watt. This one over here will do 12 volt at a max of 6 amps. Okay, so what you can use that for is, let's say you've got a Red or an Alexa Mini or something else, and you don't want to run a big heavy battery pack, which we suggest that you not do. You don't want to add a bunch of unnecessary weight. What you can do is get one of these cables, like this is for the Red here. This is a, I think it's called a D-tap connector, and then we've spliced in an XT60. And so then you can plug this into your camera, and then plug this in to the XT60 on the bird, and there you go. Now you're powering this camera from the flight packs. Now I'm going to talk about balance, okay? And so these quick release dovetails are designed to help you balance out this system. So you've got a heavy weight up front, and you want to balance it with these packs in the back. So you can loosen this thumb lever here, and then you can move these batteries to the location that you want. So this is a pretty heavy camera. It's about 7.2 pounds with this lens. So I'm going to move these all the way back, lock it down. Okay, move these back all the way and lock them down. All right, now one thing I want to mention is if you make up your own batteries, you've got to make sure that you've got enough lead length here. Okay, so be cognizant of that. You don't want to try and pull these back and then you've run out of room and you can't get them all the way back. So I've got these set to where I think they should be, and to check the balance, what you want to do is take your fingers and put them underneath the frame. You don't want to put them right here at the center where this little bend is. You want to sort of line them up a bit behind that. A good spot is right here lined up with this capacitor on the rear ESC, and you can just take your fingers and go like this and see if she's balanced out. Okay. And she's pretty well balanced. She's a little bit front heavy, but that's okay. What you have to do is make sure and get your balance pretty close. If you've got a little bit of a front heavy machine or it's a little bit tail heavy, that's okay. You just don't want it to be wildly off balance, okay? All right, so that's
Let me just add in that if it is a little bit nose heavy, you do have some adjustment for the camera forward and backward as well that you could use to also get a really good CG.
Absolutely, that's a very good point. Okay, and then additionally, there's another little adjustment that you can make. If you can't quite get your batteries into the position that you'd like, these quick disconnects are joined to the fuselage on slots. And so you can take this, right now we've got this one mounted all the way forward. So you can take this and loosen these up and reposition them and then tighten them back up and get this thing even farther back.
One other thing to add, that with props on, I know I forgot to do this while we were doing the arming, you want to make sure that all your battery wires are going to be out of prop view or prop strike distance, I guess. And one trick that you can do for this is if they're awfully close to the prop, you can just twist it before you plug in, and that'll take up some of the slack and get it away from the props there.